Yeah, towards the end, I think you mentioned some more gripes with Stacey Stafford.
Yeah.
And then I think the Skype call either, it seems like that Danny's pulling some perverted jokes as the Skype call seems to be failing at some point.
Well, it actually ends with Danny saying, "What are you doing, Paul?" So we don't know. Is Paul got his hands down his pants or something? We don't know, because Danny says, "Stop! Don't do that! Don't do that!" But it's interesting because
that happens on our calls all the time.
But what's interesting is I wrote the little scene at the end where Danny has this little speech against the way a lot of women act, because and that was sort of that's one of my more overt political speeches, where he's sort of attacking the Me Too mentality that all men are somehow sexual monsters and women are all, Danny says, what are all women, sexual imbeciles? And so what I did, though, I said, let me take that speech and put it right to open the play, because the very first, I think that I had that as the very first words Danny is speaking to Paul, is that 3 or 4 paragraph rant that he has. It's slightly different worded than as it appears at the end, but I had it at the end first, and I decided to move that up front, so you get that in medias res aspect of where we're just coming into the play, and Danny and Paul have maybe been talking about poems, and this is their conversation, or plays, or whatever Danny's been writing, and now they're talking more personally, and so that gives that in medias res quality, and we can come back to the end, and then it ends on that sort of just odd little note there, and it sort of pulls the rug out from the drama, meaning that this is the play that's been, but it's also something that isn't nearly as personal or gut wrenching as it might have been had a lesser writer written it. And that's a huge...
something just came to me too. One of the differences between Paul and the disembodied voice character too is you seem to be able to give. I think you criticized gave a critique of some of Paul's writing, and he sort of just sloughs it off. But the disembodied voice and Lana sort of have this far more adversarial relationship, and eventually they both have their problems, but neither one of them is willing to admit it in any capacity.
Well, it's also, again, while they serve similar functions, Paul is clearly a separate being, even though we don't see him, presumably. Whereas the disembodied voice and Lana at different points admit that they are aspects of one another, even though we know that the disembodied voice is not necessarily a female voice. It could be a more masculine aspect of Lana, which again ties back to this Me Too stuff and all of this transgender, cisgender stuff, is that here we have Lana as the Lana character in a sense is very female or classically female in her construction. She's irrational, she's emotional, she's needy, and then the disembodied voice is more of the masculine. Even if I had a female, and it might be more interesting to have it as a female character read it, since it seems to be written from a male perspective. But again, that's something that directors can play with, in each iteration, in each performance, and it lends to it. And by having those openings to let the actors and the directors have a bit more control, it deepens the play, and it makes the performance something different than the thing on the page.